A 26-year-old bellhop named Rigo Becerra spent the winter at the top of Mammoth Mountain. He logged 96 ski days and 1 million vertical feet. He worked behind a hotel front desk where mouse dropping sat just out of sight. One March morning, his mother found him convulsing in bed. He'd been sent home from the ER just the night before. The same virus killed Gene Hackman's wife. Welcome to Diagnosis Glitch.
Names have been changed for privacy.
Rodrigo Becerra was 26 years old. He went by Rigo. He was born in Los Angeles in 1998. His family moved to Milwaukee when he was 7. In 2022, he moved back to California for one reason. He wanted to ski. He found work at the Mammoth Mountain Inn, a ski-in, ski-out hotel at the base of the gondola, the most expensive address on the mountain. He worked as a bellhop, carrying bags, standing behind the front desk, greeting guests in the bell area near the front entrance. The obituary in the local paper describes the rest of his life in the kind of detail that makes the story land. He logged 96 ski days that last winter, over 1 million vertical feet. He was at the top of Mammoth Mountain's leaderboard. He loved sunsets at a granite spire above the resort called Crystal Crag. He played disc golf. He sang karaoke on Tuesday nights at a place called Liberty Bar. His friends described him publicly as a genuine light with the biggest heart. He shared a Mammoth Lakes home with no rodents in it, no infestation, no mice in his bedroom or his kitchen. Whatever killed him did not come from his house. Remember that. Hantavirus does not behave like other viruses your lungs have ever met. The viruses you might think of, the flu, the cold, a respiratory virus, those attack the tissue of your airways from the outside. They damage cells the way fire damages a building. Hantavirus does not do that. Hantavirus enters human cells by binding to a receptor on the surface of the cells lining your blood vessels. It does not destroy the wall, it loosens it. The molecular fasteners that hold one blood vessel cell to the next come undone. The wall does not break, it just stops holding. And then plasma starts to leak out. Plasma is the fluid part of your blood, the part the body uses to deliver everything to everywhere. Hantavirus pulmonary syndrome. That plasma leaks into your lungs, not over weeks, within hours. Here's the detail that reframes everything that follows. The body drowns itself in its own plasma. The first warning that anything was wrong came in late February 2025. Mono County Public Health announced a hantavirus death in Mammoth Lakes on February 27th. Demographics were not released. The family asked for privacy. Investigators went into the victim's workplace. They found mouse droppings in an area the victim had vacuumed in the days before they got sick. Vacuuming dry rodent droppings puts the virus into the air. It's one of the most documented high-risk hantavirus exposures in the entire public health literature. 4 days later, a second person died. Demographics again not released. This was the only victim in the cluster with visible mouse activity at home, a known indoor infestation. The exposure made sense. 2 deaths in 8 days. Dr. Tom Boo, Mono County's public health officer, was already on the case. Mono County has had hantavirus longer than any other place in California. 27 cases since 1993, the highest count in the state. Mono knows hantavirus. Mammoth Hospital had even caught it before. In 2012, an experienced local clinician at the same hospital spotted a hantavirus case early, ordered air evacuation to Reno, and saved the patient's life. So, when Rigo Becerra walked into Mammoth Hospital the night of March 5th with a fever and the kind of serious illness that gets a young man to drive himself to an emergency room, the hospital had a record of recognizing this disease. They examined him. They gave him antibiotics. They sent him home. This is where the system failure lives, and it's bigger than one bad night. Rigo Becerra was the 3rd person in 6 weeks to die of hantavirus in Mammoth Lakes. His sister, Mariela, later told the San Francisco Chronicle on the record, "They didn't think that anything was bad enough to admit him or keep him overnight, but for him to pass away the very next morning is frustrating." The reporter also obtained the coroner's report on the second Mammoth victim, and the report said something that changes the shape of this story. That victim too had gone to Mammoth Hospital. That victim too had been prescribed antibiotics. That victim too had been discharged. That victim died 3 days later. 2 of the 3 deaths in the cluster followed the same pattern at the same hospital. Walked in, antibiotics, sent home, dead. The hospital is 17 beds, critical access. Mammoth Hospital sits under California's lowest emergency room designation, classified as standby. It serves the highest incidence hantavirus county in the state, and it had just caught hantavirus successfully 13 years earlier. The trap is built into the disease. Hantavirus pulmonary syndrome begins with the same fever, the same body aches, the same fatigue, the same headache as 100 other viral illnesses. The chest sounds clear because the lungs have not yet started to flood. The cardiopulmonary phase, the part that kills, can be hours away. The CDC's own clinician brief states it plainly. Early symptoms of hantavirus pulmonary syndrome resemble many other respiratory illnesses, making it difficult to diagnose at illness onset. There is no real-time test that flags hantavirus in the emergency room before the patient deteriorates. The laboratory serology takes 1 to 3 days. The decision the doctor makes on a Wednesday night is hours before the lab can say anything at all. So the doctor makes the decision the textbook supports. Fever in a young man with no rodent exposure he can describe, stable vitals, clear chest, antibiotics for the possible bacterial infection. Come back if you get worse. Rigo Becerra got worse. He got home, he got into his bed. By morning, his family found him convulsing. He was dead within hours. To understand why this kills as fast as it does, you have to understand what's actually happening inside the chest. The virus has been replicating inside the cells of his blood vessels for days, maybe 2 weeks. For most of that time, he felt nothing. When the symptoms start, what looks like the flu is the immune system finally noticing. Cells release distress signals. Other cells flood in. They release chemicals with names like TNF-alpha and nitric oxide. Both of them have a side effect almost no one talks about. They reach down inside the heart and tell it to squeeze less hard. At the same time, the grip between every blood vessel cell and its neighbor is being pulled apart from the inside by the virus. And then in one window of about 4 to 6 hours, everything fails at once. The fasteners come undone. Plasma pours from his pulmonary capillaries into the air sacs of his lungs. At autopsy, pathologists in 1993 weighed the lungs of the first known victims of this disease. They wrote it down. The lungs were more than twice their normal weight, filled with blood plasma. There's a machine that can save someone from this. It's called ECMO. The letters stand for extracorporeal membrane oxygenation. ECMO does what an open heart surgery team does. It takes deoxygenated blood out of the body through a tube in the femoral vein. It runs that blood through an artificial lung that oxygenates it, then pumps the blood back into the body through a tube in the femoral artery. While ECMO is running, the patient's actual lungs and the patient's actual heart are bypassed. They get to rest. The flooded alveoli gets to drain. The depressed heart gets hours to remember how to squeeze. This matters because hantavirus pulmonary syndrome is self-limited. The virus does not destroy permanent tissue. Once the body clears it, the leak reverses. Most survivors leave the hospital within 2 or 3 weeks with no long-term lung deficit. The problem is keeping the patient alive through the first 72 hours. Cardiologists at the University of New Mexico spent 20 years building a protocol. They studied 51 severe hantavirus patients. By their inclusion criteria, every one of those patients was expected to die. Without ECMO, the predicted mortality is 100%. With ECMO started early in the patients who were referred in time, survival was about 66% across the series. In the patients caught at the very first sign of cardiopulmonary decompensation, survival climbed to roughly 80%. 0 to 80, with one machine and a tertiary referral center that has it. There is one more sentence in that protocol that decides the outcome of every hantavirus story. Most of the 51 patients in the New Mexico ECMO series came from New Mexico. 11 came from Arizona, 6 came from Colorado. All of them were referred to the University of New Mexico because the University of New Mexico is one of the few hospitals in the western United States that has the team and the machine to run a veno-arterial ECMO circuit for a patient in mortal cardiogenic shock from a virus. Mammoth Hospital does not have ECMO. If a hantavirus patient is identified in time at Mammoth Hospital, the survival pathway requires helicopter transfer to UCSF, Stanford, UCLA, or in a different direction, to Reno in Reno. The transfer window is roughly 6 to 8 hours from the first sign of decompensation. 6 to 8 hours is also roughly how long the cardiopulmonary phase takes to kill someone. The geography decides the survival rate. In the Eastern Sierra, the closest tertiary ECMO center is hours away by air. In the Four Corners, the closest tertiary ECMO center is in the University of New Mexico, where the protocol was written. That's why mortality in the Four Corners has dropped from over 90% in 1993 to roughly 35% today. They learned to refer fast. They learned to refer to one place. In Mono County, in the spring of 2025, 3 people did not get referred. They did not get the early blood draw the protocol is built around. They did not get a helicopter to Reno or Sacramento. They got antibiotics and a discharge slip. And then a doctor named Tom Boo and a hospital named Mammoth Hospital sat down with their counterparts in Arizona's Indian Health Service. On the 8th of April 2025, Mammoth Hospital announced it was implementing a 5-point screening protocol developed at the University of New Mexico. The hospital laboratory can run it in about 30 minutes. Patients who score high get tested for Hantavirus and get put on tertiary center referral track before the cardiopulmonary phase begins. Dr. Boo's exact words at the Mono County briefing that day: Mammoth Hospital plans to combine the use of this screening with other measures to increase the chances of identifying people with life-threatening hantavirus in time to get them to a facility with life-saving ECMO-supported therapy. The fix arrived 4 weeks too late for Rigo Becerra. The fix arrived for the next patient, who has not yet walked in yet. The Mono County Information Officer, Justin Caparuso, said something the same week that explains the bigger problem. In a one-year retrospective the following April, he said hantavirus mostly occurs in warmer months. The county usually launches campaigns toward later spring. When the deaths started in February, it threw the system off. The cluster, he said, was a complete seasonal anomaly. The calendar the public health system was built around is breaking. Mono County investigators kept turning over rocks. They trapped deer mice at every exposure site. They tested the rodents for the virus. The number that came back is one of the most disorienting in the whole story. 27% of the trapped mice were positive for Nombre virus. 27% is also the typical baseline prevalence for deer mice in Mono County in a normal year. Nothing was unusual about the percentage. The mice were not more sick. There were just more of them. The environmental investigators concluded the same thing. The winter of 2025 pushed an unusually higher deer mouse population through the Eastern Sierra. Cold, dry, brutal winter. Heavy snowpack, mice indoors. Becerra's home had no mouse activity. The second victim's home had a known infestation. The first victim had vacuumed an area where droppings were later found. 3 different exposure profiles, 1 cluster, 1 virus. And in the homes of all 3, the mice had not been more infected than usual. The cluster was not caused by a more dangerous virus, it was caused by a normal percentage virus inside a much larger mouse population that was not where anyone was looking. Rigo Becerra's celebration of life was held in Milwaukee on April 22nd. His family buried him at 26. The Mammoth cluster ended after his death. As the one-year retrospective published in April 2026, there have been 0 additional hantavirus exposures in Mono County in the years since. The bilingual outreach, the door-to-door masks, the screening protocol at the hospital, the aggressive midwinter response appears to have worked. Mammoth Hospital is running the 5-point screen now. The labs in Arizona are training the staff. The helicopters know where to go. The mice are still there. The glitch in this story is older than the patients it killed. Step back, look at the layers. The first layer is diagnostic. Hantavirus pulmonary syndrome has no real-time emergency room test. The early symptoms look like flu. The blood signal is in a 5-point laboratory screen that, until April of 2025, was not in use at most rural California hospitals. 2 of the 3 Mammoth Lakes victims died after a discharge from the same hospital that 13 years earlier had caught the same disease successfully. The same building, the same disease, 2 different decades, 2 different outcomes. The second layer is geographic. The machine that can save the patient who reaches the cardiopulmonary phase exists. Across the western United States, the centers that have it can be counted on 2 hands. Most counties cannot get a patient to one in time. The third layer is institutional, and it's older than this cluster by 32 years. In May of 1993, a 21-year-old Navajo woman named Florena Woody died at an Indian Health Service hospital in New Mexico. 5 days later, her fiance, a 19-year-old long-distance runner named Mariela Behe, collapsed in a car on the way to her funeral. He was pronounced dead in Gallup. Autopsies showed lungs more than twice their normal weight filled with blood plasma. The pathogen was new. But when public health investigators sat down with the medicine men of the Navajo Nation, the elders described 2 prior outbreaks of the same disease, one in 1918, one in 1933. They explained the cause in terms of disharmony, too much rain leading to too many mice. The climatologists confirmed they were right within months. In 1993, the system needed 3 weeks to find what their oral history had already named. And the system did not just fail to recognize the disease, it failed the families it killed. Newspapers called the new disease the Navajo flu. Restaurants refused to serve Navajo customers. Reporters published the names of the dead in violation of Navajo mourning customs. Federal agencies proposed naming the virus after the canyon where the first positive mouse was trapped until the Navajo Nation rejected it because the canyon commemorates an 1805 Spanish massacre. After every name failed, the agencies settled on Sin Nombre, Spanish for the virus without a name. It's the only virus in the modern catalog named after the failure to name it honestly. The fourth layer is federal, and it lives in 2025. The division that contains the Hantavirus branch lost its permanent director and operates under an acting one. The longtime head of its parent center resigned in protest in August after 30 years at the agency. The branch that found Hantavirus in 1993 still exists. The chain of command above it has been hollowed out. In our last video, a new prion was spreading through American wildlife. The same playbook applies. The pathogen is in the animals. The system was warned. The institutions are smaller than they were when they did the work in the first place. Mariela Becerra said something on the record after her brother's death. If it even raises awareness to doctors, she said, that just because a patient says they don't recall being exposed to mice, that does not mean that it is impossible. The droppings he never saw were behind a front desk in a hotel where he worked every day. Rigo Becerra logged 96 ski days that last winter. He skied 1 million vertical feet. He was on top of the leaderboard. And then on his last morning, the most dangerous thing he had ever touched was a few mouse droppings he never saw.
This is Diagnosis Glitch. I'll see you in the next waiting room.